start with my report. That I won't be as formal about. A lot continues to go on, certainly since the December board meeting, including the governor's budget. I did testify on Monday in Cape Cod, the first time I'm testifying on the budget. One of the learnings, I guess, when you testify on the budget is you get a lot of questions that don't seem to be so much about the budget, but probably about economic development. I know Jason had the same. But overall, I'd say it was a constructive conversation. People asking, I think, genuinely heartfelt, real concerns around the state about economic development. On the economic development side, I'm sure some folks are interested. We really picked up some really nice wins of late. The governor was able to go through them together this morning at the chamber event. But we also, if anyone's interested, you look at my LinkedIn. We did a nice post on some of this as well. Gillette announced a $1 billion expansion in the waterfront. They had moved everything up to Andover, and now they'll be adding this facility and hundreds of jobs. GE Lin, after many years of, I believe, contracting, is actually expanding again. This is the second expansion they've done and announced, which is, so it's like two very historic Massachusetts businesses. She also talked through, and I don't have everything top of mind for me right now, but she also talked through a whole bunch of wins in the AI category, which would be very, very relevant to this group. Notable AI companies, obviously, well, first of all, there are AI companies continuing to grow here in Massachusetts, but also notable ones that have opened up a remote location here, including Anthropic, Shield AI, which is a defense sector very relevant to our Shield initiative. They didn't seem to mind too much the name.
Come across a few.
What's that?
We come across.
Yeah, the name Complexity, but that's about a 1,200 person defense AI company that I was lucky to be an investor in my old life. But they originally were founded here, but one of the founders was here actually at the iLab. They opened up the first office in San Diego. They've been expanding, and they really feel Massachusetts is the only place they can find the level of talent they need for this expansion. So they now have 20 people in Waltham. They're going to 100 this year. You may have seen their advertising in the T, because they're trying to find people for their Boston office, and they're working very closely with Raytheon. They're working closely with Anduril, and they're working very closely with GE Lin. Interestingly, we'll hear a lot more about Shield later because I won't speak about that. But Ben's and team have been doing a ton of work on that front. I've been lucky to be in a bunch of those conversations. On the AI side, from this organization, I feel very grateful for the Grow with Google announcement. I don't know, are you going to cover that?
13,866 to date signed up.
Great.
Awesome. So we had, basically, if anyone doesn't know, the governor announced, again, if you want to cover it.
No, you go ahead.
The governor announced, and a whole bunch of us got to be there, an initiative that makes AI training available to every citizen of the Commonwealth with a certification program. So you can actually put in your resume that you have a Google certification in AI from completing this course. It includes vibe coding, which for a lot of people who have experimented with AI maybe have never tried that. But I think it's a very good experience to understand and try that. So that was something that we announced. 3 secretariats were involved with EOPS and Labor Workforce Development and us. Obviously, MassTech was leading the way. Carolyn did a great job emceeing the whole event. The governor spoke. But we started with a tranche of 10,000 licenses, and they were going to keep bringing tranches online. And we blew through the first tranche in less than 2 weeks. So people care, and this is it's a really great skill development opportunity across our whole workforce. To complement what we've done in partnership with the AI Coalition, we announced. The announcement was at their launch event, and we can talk about them for a moment. But I really want to just hats off to Jason Snyder and the EOTS team because they've now rolled out an AI system for everyone in the state, in state government, excuse me, and so over 40,000 people. So we're the first state to do that with every state government employee, and we're the first state to do that with a resource available for training for everybody in the state. So those are 2 places where Massachusetts is leading, and I honestly, Jason came to me one of the first few weeks I was on the job, and when he told me what he was working on, I told him I was going to hug him. And so just really excited about that. And that's, despite, some level of anxiety that you might hear about it, the people I work with, and we're getting feedback, have been incredibly enthusiastic about what it means for their work and their productivity, which has been really exciting. Just a moment on the AI Coalition. So they had their big launch the night we announced the AI agent for or assistant for everyone in the state is February 14th. Does that sound right, Jason?
Yeah.
And we were both there, we both spoke, and the governor spoke. That is a really incredible compliment to what's happening to the AI Hub. So the AI Hub is able to do the things government does well, right? Which is invest in all kinds of different infrastructure. The AI Coalition is the grassroots leaders in the community stepping up together and saying, if we want to have a world-class AI community, we need to work together to build this. So we're trying to put as much wind and support behind that as we can, and there's a lot of great collaboration happening between those two different organizations. The Leaders of the AI Coalition were here yesterday. They want to run over 100 events this year in the community around AI. They have 9 pillars, including a workforce pillar, a company recruitment pillar, a workspace pillar. We had some opportunities to take some space for companies through MassTech, and we all decided it made more sense actually for the coalition to manage that, so they're doing that. So I don't want my comments to go on too long, but that's some of the things we've been working on that we're pretty excited about since our last meeting. I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn for her report, unless there are any questions on that.
Can you talk about what it means to roll it out for all the employees?
Sure.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. So really it starts with training, because the idea behind this is we want to make sure that every workforce member of the Commonwealth is aware of what they can do with AI, what they can't do, and just kind of reduce the fear as well. And so our goal is to roll out across every secretariat, every agency, and even like UMass is, so I met with them, and there's some interest there possibly. So all of the state agencies have the ability to use this tool. It's not a mandatory tool. We're not going to mandate the use of AI for anything. But we're providing it there for everybody to use. Right? The training has many different tiers. It's training, this general training I can describe it, and then there's specific training based on role. So like if you're a developer, we have codex specific training. If you're a manager managing an AI team, all of a sudden you have somebody who traditionally had a writing style or struggled with writing. Also now they're writing better. What's going on? As a manager, that's a new thing. And so how do you learn how to deal with that? And so that's part of that training as well at the manager level. And so then we're rolling across, and then we'll be measuring value and see what comes from it. We are paying for all of it within the TSS capital realm for the first 18 months. And then we're a chargeback agency, which means we charge for our services to everybody. If we get above 30,000, it'll be $9 per user per month, which is competitive with actually higher ed.
And is it tied to knowledge-based Commonwealth information?
Yes, so we also have a MassTech AI, which we'll have to see a MassTech AI whole page that has all kinds of FAQs, all kinds of assistance, all kinds of training materials as well associated with that, and also the examples of where we've already heard stories of people coming up with new stuff. So you can say, hey, I didn't know you could do that. That's a use case I could use.
One of my favorite use cases so far, just to go down that thread for just 1 second, is Phil Eng, who is now our head of transportation and also runs the T. They used to stock millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in parts for every car they bought for the T, just in terms of backup. Because if something goes down, you can't wait months to get these parts. But they actually were able to use AI to figure out what they actually use and don't use, and what real inventory. So they have a part for everything, but do they need 20 parts of all these things or not? And AI was able to analyze that and save them tens of millions of dollars in parts. So love that story. Okay, so unless any other questions, I'm going to turn it over for the CEO's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is in 2 parts. One is the capture of the full CEO report that went out in the pre-reading, and I'm going to do a couple of deep dives there. The second part is to address the open meeting law complaints that we have received, and I'm going to start with that and turn it over to Jennifer to cover that.
Okay, great, thank you. I shared with you all by email the 2 complaints that we received and a draft response for your consideration. Essentially, there were 2 open meeting law complaints received from the same individual by the Secretary on January 14th. They came within 25 minutes of each other, and so the Secretary missed the second one and didn't forward it along. So we didn't take it up on our agenda at the last response within the statutory required 14 days. The complainant responded with another complaint alleging that we violated the open meeting law by not responding in time. So the response addresses both of those complaints. One being that, yes, we did violate the open meeting law by not responding in time. We missed the complaint and did not respond. And two, as to the underlying complaint about the meeting minutes from the December 10th meeting not being sufficient. We said that that was not ripe at that point for consideration because they were just draft meeting minutes that I had produced for your consideration, and you hadn't even seen them or voted on them yet at that point. And so in terms of corrective action, it was just a mistake, and so there's no real corrective action to take, although we did add in there that if the requester could CC me or the General Counsel at UED on their open meeting law complaints in the future, that would be helpful, so we can make sure we all see them. I don't know if there's any questions, but if nobody has any concerns with the response as drafted, I will send that out.
Can I request something further, that any complaints be also copied to legal counsel as well?
That's the hope, but they're not required by law.
Yeah, so I'd request if anyone is listening that is interested in filing complaints that they're welcome to copy me, but also I request you copy the GC of MassTech, Jennifer, and let's make sure we are always attentive to all and any complaints that we receive. That will help us with that process. Okay, any questions on public meeting law complaints or anything else? Okay. There's nothing we need to do there otherwise. Just
No,
update
I'll
everyone.
send out the response.
Okay, so with that,
I'm
turn
gonna
it
go.
back to Carolyn.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. So the deep dives I wanna do, we're gonna do one on SHIELD, even though we're gonna take up SHIELD a little bit later in the meeting. We have a video we wanna show, but I also want to bring this body up to speed on an update I gave the executive committee last time, which is on the status of the FY27 budget, so that everyone here sort of has a level set understanding between the exec-com and the full board. So we will proceed with that. So basically, the MassTech budget in 3 easy slides, I call it. We were at a high watermark on state appropriations in FY24. This is excluding earmarks at $9 million. Today, heading into FY27, we're level funded at the FY26 level at $3.5 million in the governor's budget. So we have a downward pressure on our state appropriations. And as I said to the exec-com, that we always ride out and sweat the state appropriations. We never know until that budget is signed what that number is going to be. But this is a trend that I want to alert you to. Second slide is at the same time, this is just an expression of revenue which is what we call the money that we take in and then we pass out in the form of grants is up astronomically at 287 for last year. And that bottom line is our core operating expense at $23 million. So to keep the lights on, to have the whole of MassTech do the work that we do, we've kept that, decent. We've had to expand a little bit, but it's relatively flat compared to the volume that's coming through. And that volume is around new programs, the grant management, the reporting, the contracting, the events, the convenings, all of the work associated with those dollars we're putting to work. And at that, in that orange line, that $23 million, 70% of that is people. So that is our core staffing. So if you look at the next slide, this is what I have raised to the secretary, and we've had a number of meetings with the secretary and his staff. But basically, the way that we put our budget together, and this is a forecast. We look at what the state appropriation is going to be, and so in FY26 it was $3.5 million. Then we look at what it costs to run the operation, which is $23 million. And we always have that gap, that forecasted gap that we have to fill in. And so how are we doing that? We're pulling in money from the NEMC hub. We're pulling in money from NEHI. We are pulling in other state revenue like ARPA dollars. The other big big source of funding though is the admin dollars we pull off of bond cap. Our programs, by and large, are capital programs, so we rely heavily on the admin dollars associated with staffing and running those programs. We've been told that that number's being cut by 50%, which is a $2.8 million cut in our budget. So we have the combination of the downward trend on appropriations, and then we have a 50% cut that we're looking at on what we can use for admin for running the capital program. So this has put our forecast for the FY27 budget into what I would consider an exciting status. And I have escalated it to the secretary. And so some of the mitigation that we're looking at is, we hold dollars in reserve that we take in. For example, from an MC Hub, they prepay us. And are we getting what we can on interest on those dollars? So we're looking at that. Or even the bond funds that we have, can we capture interest? So is there a way to offset through the capture of interest the funds that we are holding until they go out the door? The secretary has encouraged us also to look at our fund balance and say, it's raining. The budget is difficult across the board for this office and state government with all of the pressures. Would we consider using one-time dollars to support the recurring operating expenses? And those of you who have known me for a while on my budget, I like to balance against revenues and expenses, right? And I don't like to dip into one-time funds. But the secretary has encouraged us to actually do that and look at our runway to get through this particular period and particularly difficult budget. So when you do see in finance and audit, we'll get this budget first. When you see that, you will see probably the use and I told the secretary, having been conservative up until this point and built those funds through good, solid practices, we're not gonna all of a sudden be reckless and, drain the bank accounts. So is there anything you'd add to that?
I had a couple things, Carolyn. And
Yeah.
tell me if any of this is wrong, because
Yeah.
I'm a little bit just going off memory since we don't have it in front of us. I think this slide is all accurate, but it may be unintentionally, you could read it as, are you saying you're gonna use $19.5 million of one-time funds to offset this gap?
No.
And so, there's about $6 million, right, ultimately in true gap, because there are programs that fund some of that budget gap in other ways. So there's about there's about 6 million, sorry, I should say it a different way. There's 6 million in operating costs that somehow needs to get addressed. 3.5 million we have an appropriation for. We have roughly 2.5 million in gap. There are several places we can mitigate that, interest being one. There may still be some opportunity to take some smaller administrative fee on some things that we haven't before. That may be an option. And then, so we're getting into now something more like $1.5 to $2.5 million of utilizing one-time resources. And I think our overall balance is something of the order of $15 million. So just to put it in perspective, we're not taking $19.5 million of balance sheet. I think it's a tough fiscal year. We will work together on this to make sure this is not something that is an every year thing. But in theory, the organization could do this for 6 years and has the money to do that. I also want to understand better. We'll spend more time on it over time. Carolyn, her team have been great on this, but there's a lot to understand here. How often do one-time fees really come up? Because some organizations, you call them one-time fees, but there's enough different things that come up where it is actually pretty regular. So, and then how much does cash flow balance play in as well? Because again, if sometimes we have to do stuff through reimbursement. So there's still some things that, as we figure out how we look at this going forward, we do need to look at. But I think all of us have gotten more comfortable that the gap here is relatively small compared to the balance. Anything I said that's not?
Yeah, I mean, these are forecasts, so this is, I call it concept math, so you just did a great job on the concept math. And we're working through those budgets right now, so that we're working with the divisions, and everything is sources and uses of funds, so we have to get to the division level to see where the impacts are. So for example, if we cut the MC Hub, it doesn't help us anywhere because they only draw from those federal funds. There's a very small bucket. So we're working through all of that now. We've accelerated the budget conversation with the divisions.
does it, if we didn't cover the $1.9 million, whatever the cap is,
Yeah.
what does it mean we can't do?
Yeah, so basically, as I said, the divisions that are impacted are the ones that are funded off of that bond cap and the appropriations, which is the Innovation Institute, the AI Hub, the Center for Advanced Manufacturing, and, it's Strativo, which is doing all the work for SHIELD, so, and the Mass Cyber Center. So those are, it's a highly concentrated area. And then all of the program support, I already have a hiring freeze in place. So if people are leaving, we're not backfilling. And so that's not strategic, but it helps us trying to get our arms around everything. So legal is down a staff member right now. We are down probably in a couple of other
But I mean,
places
what does
as
it
well.
mean we can't offer, like for mission fulfillment, are we not able to
Yeah,
fulfill?
so when we looked at this earlier, the first thing, you know, cause 70% of that is people, right? So, what are we spending, program-wise? So the mashup is a good example. Are we gonna do that or are we not? With the secretary, support, I'm comfortable that that is a signature event for MassTech, we should do that. Now, do I know where the next dollar is gonna come from for the next year? Not sure, but, we're evaluating all of that right now.
The Secretary talked about it briefly, but how do you ensure that the one-time expenditure is a one-time expenditure, not a, you know, every year
Right.
you just keep on drawing?
Yeah, I mean, there's way, you know, we cut our way out of it, or we, advocate for appropriations, or we try to work with A&F to say, you know, not all quasis are funded the same, can we have a little bit more lift on that admin? You know, self-funding of MassTech with revenue generation, that is a long-term strategic plan that, I don't know, we're an instrumentality of the Commonwealth, doing the work of the Commonwealth. So are we a nonprofit that should be responsible for our own bacon? Not sure. So we
Yeah,
should
I mean,
talk about
and all the
that.
quasis that I'm involved in have different, they kind of have different strategies, right? Mass development is almost completely, and Mass ventures are almost completely self-funded, right? But mass development is really the only one who has state authority to underwrite bonds, municipal bonds. That's a pretty useful thing, right? And so, you know, there are opportunities, but I also just think, you know, this was you know this well too, right? It was a very tough budget year, and I think there will be opportunities over time to reprioritize and think about how we fill this gap. You know, we are in many other places, and this is probably true for you too, Secretary. We are in many other places utilizing funds that we normally wouldn't necessarily be dipping into those funds, but because the budget was very difficult this year, that's how we got there. And so this is just one of those places. At the end of the day, relative to the size of the balance, I think it's acceptable. I'm also coming from a startup world where you put a whole bunch of money in a bank account, then you burn it down over time. I don't want to burn it down over time, but that doesn't scare me as much as it scares some other people. But I think some of the question is, you know, if MassTech regularly had constant, large, one-time commitments that come up, you take a different look at this at some
Could you
level.
quantify that?
What's that?
Could we quantify, over the last 10 years, how many times have we had to dip into the one-time fund?
Well, so we had a significant litigation against the corporation,
Yep.
a number of years ago when I came
Yep.
into this role.
Yep.
And we had a $5 million settlement that had to be paid, we had another $6 million settlement, plus in addition to the legal fees. So, as a quasi, the Attorney General's office does not represent us in a legal battle. We hire and have to manage that
Right.
ourselves. So that's a big exposure. The campus that we have is an exposure.
I was gonna ask, I know that's a whole story, forgive me for
Sure.
interrupting time, but whether there's anything, is this a time to re-raise what's happening out with the other campuses?
Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar with the 36-acre campus, that is really been sort of, it's 40 years in the making that MassTech has had it. And always campus redevelopment. And I told the secretary, because he asked me this, I said, see that line that went way up on the program stuff that we're doing, go from 3 divisions to 7? That's what I've been focused on. I've not been focused on campus redevelopment. Maybe that's a regret at this point. Now we're at the point where some of the buildings need to be demolished. So we do have some, we did get some DCAM funds one time a while ago that we're using to take the it's something it's always been on the drawing board, but we get so relied upon by various administrations to deliver SHIELD, to deliver AI Hub, to deliver against manufacturing, that's where we
Yeah, I'm just,
prioritize.
the nature of my question is just, I wanna get a feel, is this unusual, or is this typical, is this something we've done before? Secretary's prior world, do it all the
Right.
time, I get it, but
Right.
for MassTech, is this something that is atypical?
Using one-time dollars is atypical for me.
Yeah.
That's my style. I'm very conservative.
Yeah.
But I feel comfortable that the secretary
Okay.
is giving parameters around that. It's like not 100%, maybe not even 25%, maybe 10
Yeah.
or 20%. And keep an eye on it for next year to look at what those trends are.
I do think I would trust that simultaneous with that initiative, 3.5 million in state appropriation, I presume that's relatively flexible for you?
Yes,
It's not
those,
restricted dollars?
exactly.
Anything we can do to assist with the conversation around increasing that in future fiscal years.
Yeah.
I think this organization has relied upon these large omnibus economic development bills for funding sources for many years, and as that pivots to capital, as a long-term strategy for the organization that has significant impacts on the
Yeah.
bottom line of the
Right.
organization. Those used to be operating dollars in decades past,
Right.
and now they're CapEx. That does have a strategic impact
Yeah.
on sort of the long-term view. So
Yeah.
I would encourage some sort of line item appropriation to be considered at an increased level in the absence of programmatic.
Yeah.
I think what the
operating
offset
initiatives.
has always been to that is using admin, but as that's happened, is admin fees on capital.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's less comfort in doing
Yeah.
that with A&F.
And it's restricted.
What they're
Right.
trying to
limited
accomplish,
amounts.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
yeah, because we can weather some of the ups and downs in the appropriations, but it's a double whammy, this year, so.
Well, definitely the pattern of, well, we cut their budget, but they continue to deliver twice as much as what we expected,
Yeah.
so guess what I'm doing
Right.
next year?
You know, Todd, the only other side
I
of that I
know,
will say,
I know,
no, but
I
I
know.
think this is important to note is, and not that we can 100% count on it, but A&F steps up in really big ways when a lot of organizations are in a tough spot. So just as like we have a relatively large balance and we have a tough fiscal year, and it's like, well, you should use some of that balance. By the way, it's me saying it, it's not Brand saying it or Secretary Workowitz. But where other quasis have actually been in a tough spot, A&F also has said, okay, we're gonna find that money for you. So I think we kind of have to I think we step up here and we know that we have support in other ways.
That's the
when we need it.
purpose, that's the whole
That's right,
purpose of
that's
the,
right.
of the fund.
Brandon, is there anything I said that feels uncomfortable, Eric?
No, I mean, I would say, no, perfect. It really
Is that why you
appreciate a lot
guys
of the.
are-
I don't know, is this a message I was seeing here?
You're on camera, Brad.
Yeah, I know, I was on my way in. No, I think, I understand there's been a lot of work and dialogue between the MassTech team and the economic development teams, so really appreciate that. I was gonna say, like, if I can be involved, I don't wanna be another cook in the kitchen, but if I can be helpful, I would love to be a part of these conversations. It's unfortunate there are a couple technical issues that we've come through. Some of this is not totally discretionary, but the ways that they're locked up and the ways that they're restricted, I think we have less flexibility as A&F. As Secretary mentioned, I think there are other, I don't have all the answers yet, but as we dig into this, as we see impacts, as we see the places that there are gaps, that might trigger some like creativity or like ways that we can start addressing this in the short term, and then preferably longer term, we should also talk about the business model and expectations and the appropriate funding for the agency. So I guess one way of echoing everything everyone said.
Yes, good, great. All right, so, any questions on the remainder of the CEO report? Does anything capture your attention, or you have questions about that was sent out earlier? Okay. All right, so, I think we're gonna preview our SHIELD conversation. We have a couple of items to put in beforehand, and so it's very exciting. We get to hear Ben on video and Ben live.
Ben two ways.
Ben, what I wonder, is there a soundtrack or not?
There's no custom song for this one, not yet.
And it's not 30 minutes, okay?
So are we doing that now, or are we
Yeah,
doing
we're
that
gonna-
agenda item 4?
No, it's
Okay,
part of my
great.
report.
Okay, great.
Is a deep dive,
Great.
which is referenced in my report.
Nice, very patriotic look there, Ben.
Thank you.
Who's that
It's
guy?
an industry supported by a
Hold on.
$900 billion federal authorization that covers multiple subsectors. In October of last year, Governor Maura Healey announced SHIELD, the Massachusetts Strategic Hub for Innovation, Exchange, and Leadership in Defense. SHIELD is focused on finding ways to leverage ongoing work in areas like microelectronics, advanced manufacturing, AI, robotics, cybersecurity, and more. As part of Governor Healey's announcement, she signed an executive order directing state agencies to identify ways in which they could further support defense sector growth in the state. This executive order also established MassTech as the lead or chair for the SHIELD working group. MassTech CEO Carolyn Kirk was designated as the chair, and she since designated me to take the role further. SHIELD is moving really quickly to pull together a set of recommendations and an action agenda for the Massachusetts defense sector. Part of the reason we're moving so quickly is that there are some important dynamics that are happening at the federal level. There's active changes in the Department of War around acquisition reform, and also updates around key technology areas or areas in which they're investing in research and development. So it's important for our sector and our innovation ecosystem to be aligned going forward on that. Additionally, there are areas within the state that we look at for opportunities for further investment or policy. Economic development bills are one of those. So as these potential vehicles might become available, we want to ensure that we're ready for that. So we really have this kind of narrow sweet spot of time of 3 or 4 months here where we really want to convene, synthesize, and elevate those recommendations. This isn't our first time in taking on opportunities or efforts like this. When we established the Northeast Microelectronics Coalition, it really started as the Massachusetts Semiconductor Coalition and then grew to a multi-state effort as we were pursuing a federal opportunity through the Department of War. Additionally, we also were a key participant in the Governor's AI Task Force that resulted in the authorization of $100 million for the AI Hub, of which we're actively launching as well. There's really 2 critical sections in the executive order. One is an executive branch review, just to take a look at what are the existing tools in our toolbox, and are we adequately using them for defense sector growth? Think of it as a bit of an audit, and then what we can leverage that for is a gap analysis for the SHIELD working group findings to understand, as we've identified challenges or needs within the sector or the ecosystem, where are the gaps, what are those new opportunities or new recommendations that might be able to address those gaps specifically, or potentially we could bring forward existing resources that maybe weren't being leveraged to their fullest extent. So what we started with were this concept around SHIELD days. How do we bring together our working group with other key aspects of our ecosystem in these really high energy, impactful workshops? SHIELD Day sounds like field day, so we've organized a series of these really as formative processes or formative steps for us to surface these challenges and opportunities and then further refine those as we continue forward. SHIELD Day 1, focusing on critical technology areas and opportunities and enabling aspects like advanced manufacturing. SHIELD Day 2, focused on ecosystem alignment and acceleration for transition of these technologies or other things to the warfighter and the Department of War. And then SHIELD Day 3 around skills, talent, and workforce development.
The number one thing that I heard today, and I think that will be the value proposition of this group, is connectivity. The convening power of the SHIELD group means that groups that normally do not get to talk to each other get to talk to each other. I represent really early stage startups who have a lot of sort of dual use applications with their technology. This represents access. I get to access these groups, the startups through me get to access, and that is just something that doesn't happen unless there is an intervening power like this SHIELD initiative.
This is state government stepping up and offering a place to understand the interests of the defense sector in a greater and a bigger way than before. There's always been connections, and this is nothing super new from the sense of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has always been a defense state. It's just about the state and quasi-public government infrastructure to support all the players in this important sector, inclusive of the military bases, higher education, academia, federally funded research development centers, and many more.
A big important piece is what comes next. How do we continue to take what we've done in the last, say, 3 or 4 months and continue that going forward on just a regular basis like we do for other sectors? So some key indicators, if you will, of like the success of SHIELD will be how do we as a state or we as MassTech continue forward this convening of the defense sector in Massachusetts? How do we continue to bring people together and tighten the strategic focus of some of that. But then some other indicators might also be, are we catching the eye of the federal government and getting more direct funding? Are we able to engage directly with key decision makers there and bring them more into what we're doing here within the state? And I think other indicators, as we see with other sectors, are growth of startups or key hirings as it relates to opportunities in other companies. It could be continued supply chain development or value chain development here, and then also just the strengthening of our manufacturing base here in the state through advancement in CMMC compliance and other things like that.
All right, so, that's just a teaser, we're gonna have a deep dive on SHIELD, and with that concludes the CEO report.
Great. Well, I'm very excited for item 4 on the agenda. We're gonna do the Innovation Institute's Tech Stay Residential Internship Program. And William Fuqua is gonna lead the discussion.
Right. Can you stand at the front?
No, you can, yeah, that's fine.
You can advance to that. So Tech Stay is our working title for our residential internship program. The purpose of this is to increase retention of early career tech talent by addressing barriers such as affordable housing and then professional isolation in your internship. So the model that we're come up with is a 12-week program that runs during the summer. It's a cohort-based residential community. They're all going to live in one building. So about 100 interns from essentially all over Massachusetts. Any school is eligible. And then part of this, they'll go through the shared housing, so there'll be common areas they can hang out. And there's also going to be cross-disciplinary programming that they will take part in. And that's going to deliver some professional development stuff for readiness and navigation. There'll also be some how to use AI tools, elements. It also covers entrepreneurship and exposure to the innovation ecosystem in Massachusetts. And so the goal of this is that it serves as sort of networking, and it will build long-term ties to different parts of the ecosystem in the Commonwealth. So our role in this, we're the lead convener and program manager of it. So we're going to be like the public face of it. So if you apply to the program, you'll come to us. And then we're going to coordinate the different partners we're working with. We're actually going to run a couple of the ecosystem exposure modules ourselves. And then we're going to manage outreach, and we have kind of community portals, so the interns will be able to talk to each other just amongst themselves, and it'll also have all the information about like what the different events are. And so there's going to be essentially 12 one-time modules that you're expected to go to. We're not going to necessarily require 100% attendance. And then there will also be a bunch of optional activities that the interns can choose to participate in. Some of those will be fun outings, like going to like see the Freedom Trail or Red Sox game. Others are more academic, like a self-paced online module. And so each of the 4 partners, which are BU, Northeastern, MIT, and Harvard, will deliver 2 of the required modules, and then they're also going to contribute a menu of these optional activities. And then so the expected outcome of this is that we'll have stronger professional networks at the end of it, both, and not just like you get a professional network from your internship, but it won't just be with that employer or within your school. It's people from all over. You'll get exposed to different thought leaders through the programming, and then hopefully it turns into a scalable model that we can expand to other sites if it goes well. And then I guess I could say a little bit more about the housing. So we have a location identified. It's at the BU Student Village. They're fairly nice apartments. It's a building and staffed 24/7, and it's air conditioned. So that's the 1-minute overview. So
And then,
Go ahead, sorry.
and Tech Stay is the working title
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
So I've long been working with MassTech long before I ever took this job on internship programs. So this has been an area of deep interest for me. And we also have internship programs running in all, like in many of the quasis. The biggest one of all actually is Mass Life Science Center has a very large program. A lot of the motivation around this is how do we capture the talent while they're here? It gives us the opportunity to run a 12-week commercial about what Massachusetts has to offer and build network relationship and roots in the community. If you don't like your employer, you at least still get to hear about a lot of other cool companies. If your friends are all leaving from your from your college to go elsewhere, at least you have a community of people who are much more likely to stay here that you've gotten to know. You've seen key leaders in the industry. Maybe you've toured Amazon Robotics. You know, like you have a sense for the breadth of what's going on here. And that's so this is a real experiment year to look at what, and then of course the other side is Massachusetts has a real affordability crisis, and finding housing for 3 months is very difficult. At the cost of where housing is right now, it is like extraordinarily difficult. So I think we're solving for a number of problems here, and I think at the end of the day, a lot of the evaluation of this is, do we capture these students? You know, do they start their careers, 2 years later when all of them have graduated? What percent of them are going to jobs in Massachusetts versus a controlled cohort that wasn't in this program? But I'm hoping this is the beginning of something that we actually see real expansion in over time.
Is the eligibility requirement that you're in some higher level program or school in Massachusetts?
Or you're a Massachusetts resident at a school elsewhere, right?
So if you like go to Carnegie Mellon, but you grew up in Massachusetts, you're still eligible.
I see.
It's similar to our existing intern partnership program for the student eligibility.
Yeah, because if you go to Brown, and you're a Massachusetts, we want you in this economy, right? And so we want to make sure we're doing what we can to make that possible. The final criteria of who gets selected hasn't been fully determined yet.
Right.
And there still are interesting questions where if you lived proximate, if your family is proximate to this location, are you not given preference or not? That's probably something we need to look at. There are some other interesting questions like that. But, certainly if your family is in Amherst and you want to work in Boston, and you're at, Notre Dame, I think that's a great sort of scenario where we'd want somebody in this housing system.
One question that I have is this is very much based on the premise, if I understand this correctly, that the cohort and the networking is what will make people stay. Is that fair?
I think it's community and content and exposure are the different parts of it. And by the way, where they're even choosing their jobs. Because if you're coming from Buffalo and you're at Harvard and you get a great job offer in both places, maybe a better one here, you might really say, I'm going back to Buffalo this summer because I just can't afford to pay for, I can't even find Boston-based housing from which to do this. Yeah.
And how do we anticipate competing with offers? So if they have all the access to the companies, the networking, and they're here for the summer, but then to your point, they get offers, they may be getting very competitive offers from companies in states that have greater ability to compete on housing and continuous cost post the 3 months housing. How do we anticipate being able to compete with that?
I think my best answer to this question is we're always competing with that one way or another. The question and there's a lot of things we as a state are trying to do to make that more accessible. It's hard. I mean, that's a big economic question that we're working on every day. I think the idea here is if you do not have roots in any way into the economy here, relationships, community, exposure, you are way more likely to choose to go somewhere else, right? And if you have that exposure, you are much more likely to stay here. That's the working hypothesis of this.
One of the modules is also going to address that in some way, but essentially like people who are, in the ecosystem, like what do you get by deciding to stay here? Like there's a lot of great stuff that might not be apparent if you're 20.
Yeah. I also believe that there's data that Northeastern co-ops who co-op in Massachusetts are much more likely to stay in Massachusetts. So, yeah.
So we have an AI internship program at Co-op, which is our 4th cohort now, with an AI focus. The first cohort, the first were from Northeastern, the second were from UMass Amherst, but the first cohort, 8 of the 12 students chose to work for state government. They received far more competitive offers from Google and stuff like that, because what they liked is the fact that we were giving them challenging work, and their work actually could make it to production, and we were training them, we were helping them the whole way. A lot of it is building the culture, and so that's my advice with that, build that culture and people want to stay.
No question. Yeah. First of all, I love it. I love that anything that we can do to build the ecosystem here is fantastic. So kudos to whoever thought of it. A potential ad, or maybe it's there and I just don't see it, is I love that you can get them here. I love that you can get them to stay and they have a place to live besides the modules, wouldn't it be great if there was like, they had to build something, there was a competition, or was there a science fair or something like that? Because if you send a kid for 10 weeks, like we do some pretty incredible things in 10 weeks with our summer interns that come in. So if there was a focus for them to build, or maybe they're partnering with, they build their own little mini cohorts inside,
Yeah,
so that there's a.
It's not here, but we did talk about, weekend hackathons. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's still in the plan.
Yeah, so there's also, so one of the MIT modules is with the Martin Trust Center.
Yeah.
And so, not, the thinking is that not all the students are gonna wanna commit the amount of time to like the entrepreneurship track.
Yeah.
But like they wanna build something with, I think, Delta V, where they
Yeah.
can work with those, like the program participants could opt to work with those students.
So is it meant to be educational, or is it meant to be, I'm gonna launch you into the ecosystem? Because that's where I'm getting caught up a little bit. Like, it's educational, it's a summer program, I'm going for summer education. But there's a slight difference of like, we have an opportunity to form a team here, and we're gonna build something, it's gonna be a science fair, we're gonna show off as a team what we can do when we're, so connected to each other. And then perhaps industry would then be a part of that to say, oh, amazing work you guys have done, really.
I mean, we toyed with
Yeah.
having, is it an AI focused one, which
Or
makes
whatever,
that easier,
whatever,
or
could be financial,
robotics, or
whatever.
And we decided to open it to all tech and
Yeah.
innovation, which makes that collection of
Yeah.
100 students coming in towards a common goal a little bit more challenging. So it's addressing some of the
And
modules.
remember also-
But that's a good question, do we need it by sector kind of thing?
A lot of these students are gonna have demanding jobs working for companies throughout the Commonwealth. I think we don't wanna turn this into like a high burden program. I think we wanna give them opportunity, exposure, content, community, but not necessarily, and you have to complete a thesis by the time just an extreme.
Right, so I think it's
You
launch
know,
into the
yeah.
ecosystem is the answer.
Yeah, it's sort of, we're trying to find that balance, and it may be that you'll get more cohesion by having them actually do a project. I do worry a little bit, it starts to be like, well, you want me to jump through a lot of hoops in order to just get some housing in the
Yeah.
community, so it's, how do we exactly find
There's
that
attention
balance?
for sure,
Yeah.
because, business side, I mean, we wanna find those kids, like, we want
Yeah.
those,
Yeah.
like, when I was that age, I wanted to be able to show off what it can do, so you wanna find those kids, and you really want them to stick.
I think there's gonna be enough of that here if we do it right,
Yeah.
like, I do think, hackathon is a great way to make
Yeah.
it not so
Something,
burdensome, but
right.
something you're doing on a Sunday
Yeah.
with a cohort of other people, and you're trying to figure cool
What
things
do they
out.
do Monday through Friday, though? Is it like classes?
So it's
No,
a mix.
they're in their internships, I mean, just to be
Yeah,
fair.
right. Their jobs.
So some of them are working at Amazon.
Oh.
So this is
Oh, I
how,
totally
so
missed
you get a
that.
summer internship at
It's about-
Amazon, just let me make sure everything's clear.
Yeah, I
You
missed
get a
that.
summer internship at Amazon, and you apply to TechStay, and you're from Buffalo, but you go to Harvard, and
Yeah.
you wanna stay here this summer, you wanna take that job, your alternative job is not nearly as exciting.
Totally missed
You
that.
get this housing, and now you're part of a community of people who have similar broadly innovation economy internships. You're learning about you're learning about HubSpot, you're learning about Boston Dynamics, you're learning
Yeah.
about, Biogen, you're learning about,
Yeah.
and there is a community layer and a content layer, but it's not meant to be so burdensome that they have no idea, that they're like, oh my god, at the top of my
Okay.
crazy job, I have so much other stuff I have to
I
do.
have 100 kids for you, by the way, so. Thanks for the free housing.
Yeah.
Is there a follow-up component to it? So after the 10 weeks, is that the end of the program, or is there some, trying to keep people connected so that they actually, as they're starting to figure out what they want to do, separate?
We actually haven't figured that part out yet. We definitely want to do like sort of before and after, like how did this change your reaction to staying here after you graduate? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can, they're all techie folks, simple LinkedIn or something like that,
Yeah.
will keep them connected.
Slack group that runs afterwards, I mean, I think there are.
But something to keep, to keep some
And we
community
remind them of
going.
what they were doing.
Right.
And we'll have the like community hub portal, which I don't think there's a reason we need to take down. It's not expensive to operate it.
So to get in, which I missed was the key part, you're from the States, right credentials, right age, and you also have an internship.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you wanna be a part of a community like
Right, and you wanna
this.
live in this shared community.
Yeah.
Totally get it now, yeah.
Sorry if we,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get it.
And you-
It's a good idea, it's still a good idea.
And you're looking for a job, and it could be anywhere, and maybe it'll be Massachusetts. I've been on the board a long time, we've often had this discussion, how do we keep them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and, actually, I'm gonna recuse myself because my wife works for VU, nothing to do with this program. But, she's in the graduate program, and, they often, have this situation when they come out of school, where do they go, you know? And the biggest part is housing.
Yeah.
It costs so much, you know, and that's, I think, that's how we raise it quite often.
So, and it's not free housing, it's subsidized housing.
So this,
Sure.
Is Ernesto?
excuse me, is there Ernesto? Quick question. Hello?
Yep.
Yeah.
We're listening.
Sorry. So quick question. I mean, a lot of the investment banks do this today, right? Where if you're, you're a senior right now at a business school, all the investment bankers right now are going out, grabbing these kids, putting them in New York City, San Francisco. It's a similar model, if I'm correct. So, have we looked at these organizations and looking at paying for this as well, looking at the Amazons, the Microsofts and such? Has that conversation happened at all?
I think there's some interesting ideas around sponsorship. I think for right now it's a pilot, and what we're really just trying to understand is what kind of community can we build around this? How do we help them understand what Massachusetts has to offer through a program like this? And what does it do in terms of creating those bonds that make people want to stay? You know, I think of my business school section mates. There were 90 of us, 4 of us stayed in Massachusetts. We were all here. We were all mobile. Some people wanted to go back to very specific places. A lot of people went where they found the jobs or whatever it was. But many of them just didn't even know what the opportunity set was really here. This is and it will be open to graduate students as well, not just juniors and seniors. So I think we're going to learn a lot from this experiment. But yes, it may make sense. What I wouldn't want to do is bias it so that it's only folks working for big companies. I think we want to mix.
And we do have the interns that go through our, who take part in the MTIP program that we already run, those positions would be eligible. So those students could live in Texas housing and do the program as well.
The hope would be to do something like 100 this year, 300 next year, maybe 1,000 a year. I mean, that would be a great trajectory, and we will look at other financing opportunities for that also.
Great. Super. Next slide.
Okay, so we have a motion, somebody, thank you, and a second? Great, should we do roll call?
Yes. All right. Ty.
Support.
Ruba.
Yes.
Tercasi.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Joe.
Abstain?
Paige.
Yes.
Brand.
Yes.
Secretary Snyder.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Alok.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Ernesto.
Abstain.
And Secretary Bailey.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. The next agenda item is from our CHIPS Manufacturing Initiative. We're gonna talk about Quinty? How do you say it?
Cunity.
Cunity. Sorry, now I got it. And we're gonna turn it back over to Ben to lead that discussion.
Yeah, I'm gonna be joined by Farhad. Farhad, we're gonna try to do this in 4 minutes, just because I know I'm up next. And I have shielded 23 simple slides after this.
Roll the video.
Yeah, exactly. It's important, so I'm glad you're here tonight. All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick overview. We've had a few of these approval items on CHIPS manufacturing incentives in the last meetings. Same bucket of funding from the Department of Commerce. However, Cunity falls under a different NOFO. It's focused on facilities for semiconductor materials and manufacturing equipment. So not the fab facilities themselves like Analog Devices or Macom did that we previously talked about. A few kind of highlights on this one is they're really looking at investing in critical supplies that go into these facilities in production. Really specific, unique materials that often are currently produced around the world and not here in the US. And this still fell under the same program that we ran where we had our front door for CHIPS capital grant incentive programs. Again, 26 organizations we worked with across the Commonwealth, 9 that received contingent commitments, and ultimately now 4 that are still under consideration. Cunity came into us under DuPont. They've since been spun out as a separate entity located in Marlborough, Massachusetts. I can go only surface level technical on this, so I've asked our subject matter expert, Farhad Bazagou, who started with the Center for Advanced Manufacturing during this process, but now is our strategic initiatives leads within our NIMC hub to take us over the project and provide a little bit of visual perspective as to what we're actually talking about. Farhad.
All right, thanks, Ben, setting the stage for me here. I wanted to bring up something here so you could actually relate to what we're talking about, is that this is a wafer in my hand. Now we're gonna pass it down, and what you see on one side is basically what we call patterned wafer, and the other side is really no pattern. Any semiconductor manufacturer, any semiconductor chip is made out of layers. Think of it as a cake, that you're putting layers upon layers upon layers. The old technologies were about 12, maybe 10 layers, 10 to 12 layers. Now, things that are in your cell phone or in your car, you're using as many as 40 layers. Every time you put a layer down, you need to pattern it. Patterning is one of the key requirements. Basically, you're defining roads. You're defining where the grass grows, where the pavement is, and all of that. And to do that, you need basically two things. You need a process called photolithography. And photolithography basically takes material that you deposit on a wafer, and it takes a mask, and then you expose the areas that are windows, basically, to photo. And the idea here is that the light source, by the way, the two key ingredients, the light source and the material that you put on the wafer. And the light source is provided by ASML, that everybody has heard about it. It's a Dutch company, the world-leading company that provides it. The other side is the chemical that we put on the wafer, and that's provided by DuPont. And I'm gonna call it DuPont because many people relate to DuPont, that QED is little known company, I shouldn't say little known, but they're in Marlboro, as said, there are 450 people. They're the world supplier for this material, world supplier to TSMCs of the world, Global Foundries, Intel, and so on and so forth. What they do is basically they mix up these big vats of material, and they spread it over the wafer, and you put a mask on it, and then the photo basically engages with the areas where the mask isn't, and it loosens the material, and then you develop it. So you build up, you make trenches, build up, you make trenches, so on and so forth, and you go up. What happens is that really with the material is that it has to be reactive to the light. So as we go higher up in wavelengths of light, it needs to react. So what QED does is that mixes up these material. What needs to happen is that, as you can imagine, material can be has to be deposited uniformly over the wafer. It has to be clear of defects. Defects could be anything. It could be something in the material. It could be something externally got involved in during the processing. And what this ask is basically is to have install capital equipment in line that can detect these defects, basically. And what they're asking us basically to provide $2 million, and they're getting $2.4 million matching from the government, which, by the way, is actually one of the companies that is spearheading, and it seems to be going fast through the process as well. And they have private funding of $19.4 million. And the material they're dealing with is called photoresist. This is just chemical material called. And what their total project value is $23.8 million. And during the process, they're going to be generating new 20 jobs, and those jobs are basically technicians that will be sitting on these pieces of equipment, which are basically looking at the wafer and finding defects. And that's it. So the ask for this board is to approval for $2 million grant to basically support a $23.8 million project.
And it's a contingent approval, still on getting their direct funding award from the CHIPS program office, that they're all looking towards on a pretty accelerated path right now.
And the source of funding
Is the federal matching.
For the federal matching.
Yeah.
It's funny how the world goes round, because when I started my career, I only lasted 1 year in consulting at Monitor Group, and my client was DuPont's thin film photoresist product.
Wow.
So, which was not in Massachusetts at the time, so somebody's gonna have to connect the dots how it came from North Carolina to Massachusetts.
We Secretary, Mr. Secretary, we had a chance to visit the company in Marlboro, and we did not know how key they are to the supply
Yeah.
chain.
At the time, they perceived they were gonna lose the whole business, so it's also amazing to see 28 years later that they're still the world leader, which is fascinating. Anyway.
Is it contingent also on the 19 million of private?
It's a total project, yeah, so as they close their direct funding award with the federal government, all of that's basically driven by their direct contract with the CHIPS program office, which includes their specific private dollars.
How about the capital equipment? Who's the supplier? Who's the actual manufacturer?
KLA Tanner is one of the companies,
Yeah.
and also is another company, the Japanese, unfortunately Japanese company, I don't know about it, but they have a US company that is following through. So these are mainly analytical equipment. Some of the equipment are new that they're investing on,
Yeah.
and some of them they're operating on the previous version to the US version.
And have we done the due diligence to make sure that it's the right price and it's competitively priced?
So those are, I mean, we're looking at all the, so we're assuming that they are doing that, but we do check it out.
We're supported on this through an incredibly thorough federal diligence process that's been happening on all these applications. Their first step is to go through a letter of intent, that in this case is taking 2 years to get to, and then continuing on through the direct funding agreement, includes a whole host of financial review and audit. So one of the benefits where we had both our review process through our NOFO working with the Federal Funds and Infrastructure Office on the original commitment offer, and then the continued pretty extensive diligence of the government. Yeah.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
All right, second? Okay, let's do the roll call.
All right, Ty,
Support.
Rupa,
Yes.
Tercasi,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Paige,
Yes.
Brant,
Yes.
Secretary Snyder,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Balak,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Ernesto,
Yes.
and Secretary Taylor.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe we're at item 6, which is, we're gonna talk about SHIELD. So I'm gonna invite Carolyn and Ben to go into all 26, how many slides?
23.
23 slides,
Yeah.
and take us
I have to
deep.
leave at 3:25, so we'll have to
Yeah,
take
we
a
will
break.
finish up at 3:30, and so there's no approval item here. And so I'll just kick us off. I'm the chair, and as soon as I could, I delegated to Ben.
Yeah.
He's done a phenomenal job.
That's well
So,
done.
Ben.
And apologies, as you guys can tell, I'm a method actor. I still sound like I did in that video, which was recorded last Monday. I promise I'm not contagious. But I will go through some of these quickly because I do want to make sure we get to the end because there's an important conversation that I want to raise that kind of ties back to the opening that we had. We can't talk about SHIELD without first talking about NEPC. And so I want to take you through a structured kind of update on NEPC on a few things that's going to ultimately lead into what we're seeing coming out of some of our SHIELD findings. First and foremost, and you heard it a little bit in the video, is convening and centralization. How do we bring the ecosystem, the sector together, but then also put together resources around access to equipment and facilities or other things. Federal advocacy and state policy, I'm gonna skip those for now until we get to SHIELD. But then some really key things that we've been doing with NEPC that you all have been a part of, large-scale capital projects. Also covered a little bit through the CHIPS program we just talked through. Technology transition projects for the Department of War, strengthening the defense industrial base or the maritime industrial base, and then defense sector skills, talent, and workforce. And specific to NEPC, some breaking news just yesterday, we did hear that our $5 million proposal to the Semi Foundation's National Network for Microelectronics Education to be a regional node was advanced from the preliminary round to the final round of evaluation. So the team will be presenting on that at the end of the month. But another direct workforce regional effort there. Great. We were just in DC 3 weeks ago now. That's actually when my cold started. And we continue to stand out against the other microelectronics commons hubs. Really, we showcase what 2 years of building and implementing NEPC has looked like. A couple of key things coming out of this. We had a good sidebar meeting with the Honorable Michael Dodd about, he's now leading the critical technology areas for the Department of War. They are shifting microelectronics a little bit at a high level from lab to fab to now to think lab to fab and to field, so to go further. So that's changing the scope of what we're looking at a little bit, not just be a step from lab to prototype, but how do we further help with transition. We've taken that approach to some extent in MC and making sure we have really strong connections to transition and integration partners, but a new area that we're looking to continue to further on the scope from that standpoint. In year 3 of 5, the Department of War is really looking at continued strengthening engagement within the DoW itself for other channels and pathways. However, they're also focused on us pursuing other federal opportunities through Department of Energy or Department of Commerce. Part of that is the second bullet point of number 3. There's not going to be a CHIPS 2.0, and you're on your own for sustainability. So earlier in the conversation around using interest from MC, I'm a little concerned about that because that's part of our sustainability plan originally. But pursuing these other pathways like the workforce fund or some other things coming out of commerce and energy are important. There's a recognition of significant state support here with the $40 million state match commitment, which I'll come back to in the end. And they recognize that we are extremely well positioned as a Northeast or New England regional entry point for the Department of War beyond microelectronics, which we'll get into in SHIELD. Microelectronics is really a critical enabler to a lot of things, but a lot of our member organizations do more than just microelectronics. And I don't know what happened here. We were in a room with 900 people. Something happened on my camera, but Mark and I are the professional dumb teams of any comments, so we try to have a little bit of fun. I don't think Mark had as much fun as I did. Just a quick refresh again on the convening and centralization aspect. Really critical to our success so far with MC. We are the hub lead, and we've created this fair forum for participation for large and small companies, especially the now 120 plus startups that are part of MC, helping people find each other within the hub, but then also find funding opportunities that we have or partners with others. And this approach helps us to compete with other states like California, Texas, and Virginia, or regions like the Southwest and the Midwest-led hubs. We're demonstrating this specifically on these transition acceleration projects, taking these critical technologies that the Department of War is interested in and moving these technologies from the lab to the fab and ultimately working on those integration and transition plans. You all know we were awarded 6 projects through the first call for projects. At the bottom, 4 of those projects have been extended for year 2 funding. The 2 that were not selected was because they were earlier in that TRL stage, so that they made a decision that these were further from the field, so they want to look to fund projects elsewhere. And I'll talk about where we're competing now in a new call for projects. The green table is a lot of acronym soup, but this is actually showing output from these projects. Process design kits, ASIC designs, or specialized chip designs in these technology areas, so we're actually accelerating these technical projects within this first year. Over the last 2 years, we've kind of had 3 rounds of this, of 2 call for projects and a call for topics. The distribution in the right-hand side shows participation of organizations in the different technology areas across the region. Massachusetts led, we have half of our members from Massachusetts, which you see reflected here, but then also pulling in participation from elsewhere in the state. This is a model that's working, bringing these groups together and building these value chains around them to transition and advance these projects. What that looks like from a map perspective, I'm happy to show this as a federal map that actually paints Massachusetts by participation versus some of what we saw with things like NSF engines and EDA tech hubs. And other breaking news here is last week, 11 of the proposals we submitted for the second round of call for projects directly were selected to move forward to full submission proposals. And then we had 3 cross-hub submissions that are invited for full proposals.
6 of the 11.
6 of the 11, yes, and then 3 other cross-hub proposals, thank you. And we're competing again with the other 7 regional hubs here. The budget isn't as big as the first call for projects, so we're aiming for 2 projects, would be ecstatic if we were awarded 3. On the centralization and connecting the network front, we have launched our member portal, where individuals and organizations do have their own profile, so a bit of a member's Facebook or LinkedIn, if you will. And this enables people to find each other and find other resources here within an MC Hub. There's the organizations directory, a members directory. Should have put this on 1.5x speed. But then this is also where we ran our call for projects. All the information around teaming with each other, finding resources, what capabilities exist in the ecosystem, submitting proposals in combination with our Airtable platform, really created a singular place where people could actually come and work together, and we're not the bottleneck through email or introductions that way, which the first time we ran this, that was a challenge. So this was a much more inclusive, streamlined process. Other area that we're executing on the mission, the strengthening of the defense industrial base, our Propel program continues to be very popular. We've now run this, I think, four times, a total of 6.2 million in applications with applicants from 13 states. We've been able to make 40 awards here to startups to continue to grow them within this defense industrial base in these technology areas. Again, focused on microelectronics, but what we're finding in SHIELD is there's a lot more opportunity. And then large-scale capital projects. I will cut this video short, but if you guys remember when we started this, we were able to leverage $7.7 million of the federal dollars to unlock about $40 million of co-investment from Applied Materials, both for equipment at MIT Nano and staffing. This has now come online. Some of these tools are first in the world tools that are literally just like right across over there. They were really excited about that, create a whole host of different opportunities for companies here in Massachusetts and the region. Kevin, do you mind?
No, it's okay. We got it.
Okay, all right. Centralization and capability and capacity. We have also a website here that connects the various lab facilities and fabrication facilities here in the state. So these categories of things like centralization, connectivity, and these different areas are really important because as we get now into SHIELD, the Strategic Hub for Innovation, Exchange, and Leadership in Defense, this is an area that we're continuing to identify opportunities. And we got the precursor video from someone who's been working on this really hard over the last couple months, but I want to take you through a few more specific highlights and go a little bit deeper. Primary objectives of SHIELD, we talked about those different sections. We're going to really dig into SHIELD findings. I want to thank Secretary Paley for really putting out at the beginning, opening meeting to model how we want to work together as an ecosystem and as a sector through this initiative. Really focused on cohesive collaboration amongst all of the different members of the ecosystem, and be opportunistic. If there's other federal funding opportunities, if there's collaboration opportunities that are surfacing up through this, we don't have to wait for a report to come out at the end. We're joined by a great administration appointed team, inclusive of 3 secretariats, other quasis, and the Federal Funds and Infrastructure Office, an organization called the Business Executives for National Security, as well as the Massachusetts National Guard. We were required to appoint at least four external members. Tomorrow we'll have about 35 members that are going to be sworn in from all across the organization, or all across different organizations. This includes some of our board members, colleagues from Miner, Draper, and elsewhere. What is SHIELD and what is our approach to this? I mentioned in the video, the SHIELD days sound like field days. We're really trying to take a strategic approach here to think about where do we play, how do we win, what are the skills, talent, and workforce that we need to get there, and how do we put all of that together into a summative playbook for our defense sector. We started out launching SHIELD in December. The first SHIELD day was focused on critical technologies and enablers, some of those new changes at the federal level. Last month we held SHIELD Day 2 on ecosystem alignment and acceleration. And now tomorrow actually is SHIELD Day 3 on skills, talent, and workforce development. We're gonna have a 4th summative Shield Day held at Minor on April 16th, really just with the core working group to dig into pulling all this together ultimately into a report to deliver to Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. So we are here. Just a quick flavor of where we stand on critical technology areas. We're really focused on those 4, which MassTech's already working on pretty extensively. And a quick comment from Emil Michael, who is the lead CTO for the Department of War. The consideration here is that they went from 14 critical technologies to 6. If you're not on the list, that doesn't mean you're not important. It means that the department feels like their approach is adequate, which is important for microelectronics because it was on the previous list. It enables a lot of these. So if they're on the list now, they're looking for new approaches to this. So biomanufacturing is a key one that there's a lot of interest in and around the state on. Contested to logistics for things like autonomous robotic systems. Obviously, applied AI is a key focus of other parts of MassTech and the Commonwealth, as well as quantum and battlefield information dominance, which includes new sensors and communications. So just a quick where we've been, about everywhere in the state. Shield Day 1 in Lincoln. We were out in Pittsfield in Western Mass for a small business roundtable, as well as a business General Dynamics. Tour down at Ginkgo Bioworks and a biosecurity roundtable, small medium manufacturer roundtable in Worcester, as well as Quinsigamond Community College. Shield Day 2 at WPI, a visit to Raytheon in Andover, new AI autonomy company, Autonodyne at the Seaport. Just a quick snippet of a few things here. But just a quick review, Shield by the numbers. Since the end of October, we've had 68 events, engagements, and meetings and roundtables by the end of this week. We've had over 300 participations in our Shield Days, 100 plus folks in roundtables and site visits, 50 plus Shield recurring attendees to our Shield meetings. And this is an all of MassTech approach. While it's led through our Strativo team, we're pulling on expertise from all of our divisions here, 15 primary staff members, but over a total of 51 in total have contributed to this across, MC, CAM, cyber, innovation, our AI hub, our executive team, Marcom, finance, legal, HR, and others. Great traction on social LinkedIn, both for MassTech. Just 3 posts specific to our Shield Days have garnered over 10,000 impressions. I've had 20 specific posts myself. I know Scott likes to follow me on LinkedIn, with about 54,000 impressions and almost 1,500 likes. You gotta get, I don't think any of those likes are yours, Scott, so there's still room here. Not that this is a key indicator of performance, but 27 presentations and 567 slides. Not all new slides, but a lot of those are. And at the end of the week, I will have to put 1,000 miles on my truck. So, very, very active. A lot going into this effort in a really short period of time. How we're looking to frame the report, thinking about the conversation we had with a large defense contractor, when they make investment decisions, are we gonna make it? Are we gonna buy it? Where are we gonna make it? Where are we gonna buy it? We'd like them to answer in Massachusetts. So identifying challenges that are in the way for them to do more here, and then what might recommendations, incentives look like to get them there. But it's not just for the large defense contractors, not just to make or buy. How do we discover or do more research here? More tech transfer, founding more companies or growing and scaling here as well. And then what does that look like for those different key stakeholders? And also the Department of War, because we'd like them to invest more here as well in research, in infrastructure, and some of what we're doing. As it relates to these technology projects. So, we're in the middle of this, we're looking to surface this report coming up end of April, early May, but we're already thinking about what comes next. And there's a lot of similarity in terms of what we're seeing in terms of how should we be organizing our efforts going forward for the defense sector that align with what we're already doing with MC. A lot of the organizational infrastructure that we have in place, maybe for microelectronics, but when we think about biomanufacturing or contested logistics or other critical technology areas, we kind of have some structure there. We're already working in these top 4 areas. I do think that federal advocacy and state policy are some other specific recommendation areas that we'll dig into. But there's a scaffold here for us to build on. The question is, how do we move that forward? So when we look at how do we operationalize SHIELD, we had our budget conversation and some of the headwinds that we see there. There's potential vehicles for supplemental budgets or maybe economic development bills. But currently what we've been doing in each of these areas has been very piecemeal or our previously integrated strategy. We're currently doing the convening out of Strativo, and we're funding this to as much as we can through NC under our sustainability and directive from the federal government. There's only so far we can go there, so we're not actually using MassTech state dollars for this right now. We have various ways in which we have indirect federal advocacy or state policy here, and then we do fund defense-related projects across our portfolio, but none of them are, it's all limited, right? It's part of the broader programs. Best case would be state budget, formal codification, you know, if we could get to a formal economic development bill at some point, and continued support from the Federal Funds and Infrastructure Office and federal funding. What we're seeing right now, given where we're at fiscally and where we're at in the year, is my realistic view on this is we do have a pathway to actually operationalize this with the NEMC match that the state has committed as part of the success and sustainability of the NEMC hub. We look to actually take what we're doing with NEMC and bring that together with where we're headed with SHIELD, not have two different things, but actually leverage some of those state dollars which are anticipated to come from the federal matching fund that could be flexible for supporting operations in some of these activities. With that, we may be able to get to a point of additional federal advocacy using some of that match or other talent workforce efforts. If there is, depending on if there is or is not an economic development bill, I think we'd be continuing to work with the Federal Funds and Infrastructure Office on federal match to whatever extent it can be there. But this is kind of where we're at, I think, in looking at the budget that Carolyn presented. This is again something where Strativo's piecemealed out in terms of how our time is allocated across various parts of our state funding. But NEMC is incredibly well positioned to continue to carry this forward, and I think we have a funding pathway if we can continue to work to unlock the next tranches of the NEMC match.
And before we move off the slide, what does indirect mean in this month?
I would say, like, from a state policy standpoint, and it's maybe a little simplified, I don't know if we've ever really had direct state policy for our defense sector. I think there's some specific things that came up in some site visits that maybe we take those into consideration. A federal advocacy standpoint, we have the Roosevelt Group that represents the Mass Task Force on military bases and installations. But I do think that what we're hearing from our ecosystem is there's an opportunity for the state to be more proactive in advocating in Washington around how do we get more investment from Department of War and others here in the state along these lines. And so is there a more direct approach we can take than maybe like the governor's person that's down in DC, but having
Our office is one person, whereas other states
right.
have a whole team
Exactly.
down there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know I ran through that very quickly, but happy to take questions.
Some of my friends who work in the defense sector have mentioned that there's a fair amount of technical and manufacturing capacity available at like universities in town, but there's some like regulatory constraints around whether those institutions can actually allocate some of that work for defense purposes. Any sort of context you can kind of share around some of the constraints around what resources can be brought to bear?
Yeah, Lincoln Laboratory is a really good example. They have a specific charter where they're not allowed to compete commercially. So they're a great step from like an MIT Nano to go from building one where you're really, really high touch to in a quality controlled environment. But startups can't go and sell those things. They're looking at potential legislative changes so that map I shared where we've connected capability and capacity is to help get around some of that, where other academic institutions do have the ability to make some of these things, or we can go to a global foundry or a VA system or anything out there and optimize.
Some example that shared with me is that certain core facilities have resources that you have, as an example, can actually do that kind of work.
Yeah.
So there's like inherent constraints,
Gotcha.
which seems to be counter to the objective, right?
again, I think we'd have to dig into specifics with each university, but there are a significant number that are part of MC that do defense-related work that have semi-classified spaces.
Although they can free.
Yeah.
Great, we're at time.
Yeah.
Great, so, thank you, Ben, and this has really been a huge undertaking, so we appreciate just the amount of work that's gone into this for the whole team, but you've just taken on a huge amount of effort, so thank you. We didn't even talk about how we got to convene military leaders from NATO last week, right?
Yeah.
We did this.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting what interest has been generated from this. We had 6 NATO countries basically talking about our innovation sector and how they can benefit from it, which was fascinating. Not a meeting I ever imagined I'd be chairing, so. Anyway, thanks everyone for your time. I think we are ready to adjourn the meeting unless there's any other new business. Okay, so I'm gonna conclude at this time as the meeting is adjourned.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Carolyn, I see why you decided to delegate all that.